Prithi Reddy, Harsh Narde. Two names. One story that unfolded in less than 48 hours and ended in a way no one saw coming. Hello, welcome to Dark Mind Files, your ultimate destination for deep, disturbing, and real crime stories. Tonight's case is not just about what happened, but about what was missed. A story where everything seemed normal, until one small detail exposed the truth. If you like our work, please like this video, share with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe our channel. Prithi Reddy had reached a point in life where everything finally felt stable and under control. At 32, she had built a strong and respected career as a dentist in Sydney. Her work demanded precision, focus, and long hours, but she handled it with confidence. Patients trusted her, colleagues admired her dedication, and her future in the field looked promising. She had worked hard for years to reach this position, and it showed in every part of her life. Outside of work, she stayed closely connected to her family. Regular calls, visits, and shared routines kept those relationships strong. She was known as someone dependable, someone who never disappeared without a word. Her life followed a steady rhythm, one that gave a sense of security to both her and the people around her. There had been a time when things were different. A past relationship had brought stress and emotional strain, but that chapter was now closed. Walking away from it had not been easy, yet it marked an important turning point. Since then, she had begun building a new path, one that felt calmer and more certain. A new relationship had entered her life, bringing a sense of comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming, but it felt safe, and that mattered more than anything. When she prepared for the medical conference in March 2019, everything seemed routine. She packed with care, organized her schedule, and made sure to inform her family about her plans. The trip was meant to be simple, just another professional commitment in a busy but well-managed life. There were no signs of trouble, no reason to feel uneasy. It was just another ordinary beginning. The conference was filled with movement and quiet energy, the kind that comes from professionals focused on their work. Attendees moved between sessions, gathered in small groups, and followed tight schedules. It was a controlled environment, predictable and safe, where every moment had a purpose. Nothing about it suggested the possibility of danger. Somewhere within that crowd, however, was a presence that did not belong to Prithi's present life. Her ex-boyfriend, Harsh Narde, appeared without warning. There had been no indication that he would be there, no message, no prior contact. His arrival felt out of place in a setting that was otherwise routine. At first, it seemed like a coincidence. Large conferences often bring together people from different places, and unexpected encounters can happen. But this situation carried a different weight. Their history was not distant or neutral. It was recent enough to still matter, and unresolved enough to create tension beneath the surface. Security cameras later captured brief moments of their proximity. They were seen within the same spaces, moving through the same areas at overlapping times. Nothing in those clips appeared alarming at first glance. There were no visible signs of conflict or urgency. Everything looked ordinary to anyone unaware of their past. As the day progressed, those small moments began to connect. What seemed random started to form a pattern. Investigators would later question whether his presence was truly accidental or something more deliberate. By evening, another camera recorded a critical moment. It showed them entering her hotel together, a detail that would later define the entire investigation. At that point, nothing appeared unusual. But that ordinary moment quietly marked the beginning of something far more serious. As the evening settled in, the pace of the conference slowed, but the hotel remained active. Guests moved through the lobby, elevators opened and closed, and security cameras continued recording every quiet moment without interruption. Among those recordings was a detail that would later become the most important piece of the entire case. Late that night, footage showed Prithi and her ex-boyfriend walking into the hotel together. Their movements appeared calm and unremarkable. There was no visible tension, no sign that anything was wrong. To anyone watching in real time, it looked like an ordinary return after a long day. They entered the elevator and disappeared from view. That was the last confirmed moment Prithi was seen alive. After that, everything changed in ways that were not immediately visible. Her phone, which had been active throughout the day, suddenly stopped responding. Messages that should have been answered remained unread. Calls went unanswered. For someone who stayed consistently connected, the silence stood out. Time moved forward, but there were no new traces of her movements. No footage showed her leaving the hotel. No records indicated she had checked out or gone elsewhere. It was as if her presence had been erased the moment she stepped inside. Investigators would later focus on that gap, the period after she entered the hotel and before anyone realized she was missing. It was a window where something had clearly happened, but no one had witnessed it. The absence of activity became its own form of evidence. What made the situation more unsettling was how normal everything looked before that moment. There were no warnings, no visible signs that anything was about to go wrong. Just a single entry captured on camera. And then, nothing. The next morning, the routine of daily life continued for everyone else. But something about Prithi's silence began to feel wrong. She was someone who stayed in touch, especially when traveling. A simple message or quick update was part of her normal behavior. As hours passed without any response, concern slowly turned into unease. At first, it seemed like a minor delay. Conferences could be busy, schedules could shift, and phone batteries could run out. But as more time went by, those explanations stopped making sense. Calls continued to go unanswered, and messages remained unread. The silence no longer felt accidental. By the end of the day, worry had grown into fear. Her family decided to report her missing. Authorities began their work by gathering basic information: her last known location, her travel details, and her recent activities. Very quickly, the focus shifted to the hotel where she had been staying. It was the last place she had been seen and the last confirmed point in her timeline. Investigators started reviewing security footage and checking hotel records. The same moment appeared again and again: her entry into the building with her ex-boyfriend. There was no footage of her leaving. Attention then turned to her hotel room. At first glance, nothing seemed obviously out of place. The space was not heavily disturbed, and there were no clear signs of a struggle visible right away. But subtle details began to stand out upon closer inspection. Small inconsistencies suggested that something had happened inside that room. At the same time, another critical detail emerged. Her car was nowhere to be found. This new development added urgency to the search and deepened the mystery surrounding her disappearance. The search quickly moved beyond the hotel as investigators began looking for any trace of Prithi outside the building. Her missing car became the next critical lead. It was one of the few physical clues that could point to where she might have gone after entering the hotel, or what had happened in the hours that followed. Police widened the search area, checking nearby streets, parking zones, and quieter neighborhoods. Time was becoming an important factor. The longer the delay, the harder it would be to understand the sequence of events clearly. Then, not far from the hotel, her car was located in a relatively quiet area near Kingsford. It was parked in a way that didn't immediately attract attention, blending into its surroundings. At first glance, nothing about it seemed unusual, but the discovery itself raised serious concerns. If she had left voluntarily, there would likely have been some form of activity, some indication of movement or communication. Instead, there had been complete silence. When investigators approached the vehicle and began examining it, the case took a devastating turn. Inside, they found Prithi's body. The discovery confirmed that this was no longer a missing person case. It was now a homicide investigation. The focus shifted instantly from searching for a missing individual to identifying how and where the crime had taken place. Evidence at the scene suggested that the car was not where the attack had originally occurred. Certain details pointed away from that location, indicating that her body had been moved there after the incident. This raised new questions about the timeline and the level of planning involved. What had seemed like a disappearance was now revealed as something far more deliberate and far more disturbing. With the discovery of Prithi's body, the investigation became more focused and urgent. Every detail now mattered, and investigators began reconstructing the final 48 hours with precision. The goal was to understand not just what happened, but how it unfolded step by step. They started by aligning all available data: CCTV footage, hotel access logs, and phone records. Each system had captured small fragments of time, and when combined, those fragments began to form a clear and structured timeline. Movements were tracked minute by minute, revealing patterns that could not be ignored. The hotel's keycard system showed exactly when the room door had been opened and closed. These timestamps became critical. They indicated that after Prithi entered the room, there were movements linked to her ex-boyfriend that continued long after there should have been any normal activity. The absence of any recorded exit for her raised immediate concerns. CCTV footage from hallways and nearby areas added another layer. It showed controlled movements, with no signs of panic or urgency. This suggested that whoever was responsible believed they were acting carefully, avoiding attention. At first glance, it gave the impression of a well-planned sequence. Phone data told a similar story. Location signals and activity logs placed both individuals within the same areas during key moments. However, there were inconsistencies, small gaps, and overlaps that didn't align with a normal sequence of events. As investigators examined these inconsistencies, the idea of a perfect crime began to weaken. What seemed controlled on the surface was starting to show cracks underneath. Each new piece of evidence tightened the timeline further. And with every step, it became harder to ignore the direction in which all the details were pointing. As investigators continued to piece together the timeline, the case seemed to be moving toward a clear conclusion. The evidence was building in one direction, and each new detail strengthened that path. It appeared only a matter of time before the person responsible would be formally identified and questioned. But before that could happen, an unexpected development changed everything. Just hours after the estimated time of the crime, news came in about a serious car crash on the Pacific Highway. The incident involved a single vehicle, and the driver did not survive. At first, it seemed unrelated, another isolated event on a busy road. But when authorities confirmed the identity of the driver, the investigation took a sudden and dramatic turn. The driver was Harsh Narde. The timing immediately raised questions. His movements after the last confirmed sighting at the hotel now became critical. Investigators quickly connected the crash to the ongoing case, and what initially appeared to be separate events began to merge into one timeline. Further analysis suggested that the crash was not accidental. The nature of the incident pointed toward a deliberate act. With this conclusion, the situation shifted again. The only person believed to be directly connected to Prithi's final hours was now gone. There would be no arrest, no formal charges, and no courtroom trial. The legal process that usually follows such cases had come to an abrupt end. The opportunity to question him, to understand his actions, and to hear his version of events had disappeared. Despite this, the investigation did not stop. Authorities continued examining every piece of evidence, determined to establish the truth as clearly as possible. Even without a suspect alive to answer questions, the case was far from closed, because the evidence was still there, and it was beginning to speak louder than ever. In the days that followed, investigators shifted their focus from finding a suspect to proving what had already begun to take shape. With no trial ahead, the evidence itself had to tell the complete story. Every detail was re-examined, every timestamp verified, and every movement placed carefully into a final timeline. At first, the crime appeared controlled, almost calculated to avoid attention. There were no witnesses stepping forward, no direct confrontation captured on camera, and no confession to confirm what had happened. It created the illusion of something carefully planned. But that illusion did not last. The deeper investigators looked, the more they found small details that could not be ignored. CCTV cameras from different angles revealed consistent movement patterns that aligned too closely to be coincidence. Hotel records showed exact entry times that contradicted any idea of separation between the two. Phone data quietly filled in the missing spaces, tracking locations and activity even when everything else seemed still. None of these details alone would have been enough. But together, they created a complete and undeniable picture. The plan had one critical flaw: the belief that small details would go unnoticed. In reality, those details became the strongest evidence. What unfolded over 48 hours shocked the entire community. It happened in a place considered safe, during an event meant for professional growth. There were no clear warning signs for anyone nearby to act on. Everything appeared normal until it was too late. In the end, there was no courtroom verdict, no final statement from a judge. Only a timeline, built from evidence that could not be erased, and a quiet, lasting truth. No crime is ever truly perfect when the smallest detail is left behind.